Good afternoon.
Hi.
So we are going to spend the next 30 minutes or so focusing on our principal area of expertise, which is manufacturing security, the area where we've both been working together for around about coming up for 5 years now. And the way we're going to start off on this is firstly by talking a little bit how I first got into the world of manufacturing security and the influences that helped me along the way. Starting off with how we first started working together and the way that I was able to get along with that really steep learning curve of coming into manufacturing through some of the help that you gave me.
Sure. I was factory IT, so on the floor, bloodstained T-shirt, whole 9 yards. Stuart came in as the security professional that was hired to handle that, and I had to kind of teach him how a factory works, what doesn't work in a factory and what works in a factory. First lesson, very clearly off the bat, was factories are families. They're varied and they're dysfunctional, but they're this family unit. And if you don't find a way to get in as a security professional or even as IT, they will kick you right out. I've seen it happen. I've seen vendors go. I've seen my teams go because they weren't able to work alongside in a productive manner that was going to help their goals as well as ours.
It was very obvious right from the start that your existing relationship with not only the technical side of the factory, but also with the operator side of the factory as well, was something that was really able to help my job of looking at the security aspects of it all, really come along. And because of the relationships that you had already built and developed, the factory teams were a lot more welcoming for me when I was going along initially with my sort of checklists and clipboards and trying to work out how it all fitted together.
And they didn't like that at all, obviously. The really funny thing was that, the factories that I've worked with over the years, it's just like having a bunch of aunts and uncles and some nieces and nephews. And I had to tell them not to haze him when he walked in the first couple times, because there was definitely some stuff that was planned. So it always ends up making me laugh thinking about it. But it really changed your perspective on you as a security professional. I remember you telling me.
Well, it did. The way it really sort of started was as I started going about my work, what really came across, and from the way that I'd been doing risk assessment work previously, and I'd been with big corporate organizations for sort of 15 odd years before that, starting off as a software developer before getting into security. But the thing that was really came to light was the fact that in the work that I'd been doing and what I needed to sort of get to really start to understand in the factory was that we'd never really taken into account the people within the factory prior to that. And that was a bit of a revelation because there's so much emphasis on fixing the systems and patching and so on that the actual people who are reliant on the factory for their living can be really impacted by the work that we do.
Mm-hmm. There's definitely a very impassioned group of people that at the end of the day, they work so hard because this is what they have to do. And I think we all can relate to that we have our jobs because we have to have them. Some of us love it. Some of us just do our job because that's what we have to do to support our family. So I think that once you understand that about factory operators, you start to see a different light. And we keep talking about this all the time, that they will forget about security and just keep running. The factory will always keep running. Production will never stop, and they'll completely bypass us just to get their jobs done. And I think we have to keep that in our mindset, that if we don't come alongside their priority list, which is production and safety, probably safety then production actually, then they're gonna kick us out. Or they'll start unplugging our security appliances that are on-prem. And I've seen it happen multiple times.
Right, and this wasn't just sort of factory locations in the US either. We've encountered almost exactly the same scenarios just about everywhere in the world where we've been. And we started off in food factories together, and then we've been in electronics factories and semiconductors. And this community thing has sort of remained a constant throughout. And having an appreciation of the culture can really help sort of identify some of the types of security problems that you may not have necessarily considered beforehand.
We always say culture on culture on culture. So you have national culture, you have factory culture, and then you have local culture. So that always is combined in your thought process of how you're going to do things. So an example that I always come back to is we were in a factory that was in Southeast Asia. And because of religious reasons, they had a lot of conservative dressed women that were in there. And I happened to notice that we were standing on the production line that there was a lot of network switches that were underneath the line right where they were standing. And obviously, if you know what a switch is, there's network plugs in it, obviously. And they kept getting hitched onto the bottom of their skirts. Now, culturally, if something had happened, whether the line ripped their dress or ripped out the production line, it would have equally been bad. It would have been a halt to that particular line. So in an effort to address that, I had spoken to a couple women that were on the line and asked them if they had issues. And they said, yes, we always are constantly dodging, which was cutting down on production time in a weird way on that line. So we mentioned to the head of IT when we were there. Not even 10 minutes later, we were out pointing out every switch that needed to be fixed and every line that was dangling. So it's about observation, opening your eyes. Try to take a look a little bit outside of yourself. We had lunch with the operators. They brought in food for us. We had those connections. You need to find those connections, even if it's something super small, like standing at the water cooler, standing at the coffee machine. We had some of the best conversations there. And they open up, and you get to start to hear about how security is impacting their job, or what works and what's not working. We heard both.
Yeah, that was quite a revelation. But also one of the other sort of big sort of cultural things that we encountered was how where there is a factory that's part of a big sort of corporate organization, and edicts get sent down from on high to do things like patching and updating systems, how those instructions, how the teams, the IT and the technology teams within the factory will be very inclined just to follow the instructions because they've come from the corporate part of the organization.
The powers.
Right. And some of those instructions can end up having some quite significant negative effects on day-to-day operations. And we've seen incidents where that has happened, on a number of occasions.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the ones that always comes back to my mind is having conversations and relationships with the IT teams in a very short amount of time going on site. Again, Southeast Asia, there was a security appliance that was not racked yet. And I had asked, I said, why is this box still here? Are you guys okay? Do you need help? Thinking I could get the right people in place. And they literally said, we're not going to rack it because we're going to have to stop production. And nobody's taken into account, we need a production outage. And we have 2 a year, and we don't have time.
Yeah.
And that was really disheartening because as security professionals, we know how much those appliances cost and the labor that went in to get them to work on the back end. So the fact that they wouldn't even rack it because nobody cared about what they had to go through was something of a revelation moving forward. Because at the end of the day, we've realized that security needs to be more about empathy when it comes to factory security, manufacturing security, and that carries into other industries as well.
Yeah, I remember when we found that box in the server room, and it's like, what's this? I said, well, we don't want to unpack it because we don't know what it's going to do.
Yeah.
So
and that's not the first time we've heard something like that, but that one was very kept in my memory. Mm-hmm.
So I suppose one of the points that we really want to make is that security will, the factory will carry on working, in spite of or despite whatever sort of security-related instructions are going to be given, and we've, and it's sort of examples like that.
And it goes beyond that too. I've been in factories where security has been completely bypassed, or even IT has been completely bypassed because they weren't educated on what it was. So there is a bit of a failure when it comes to bringing information down. And I'm not talking about security awareness, I'm just talking generalized. Example would be a floor needs to be cleaned in a factory that's producing food. And the worker will be frustrated because there's no power drop in that area. So he'll unplug the workstation, plug the fan in, and keep it moving, because that's what he needs to do to finish his job so he can go home. However, we're getting alerts and everybody's in a panic that something happened to that workstation, and then when we realize what it was, all we need to do is just put another power outlet just a little bit away and then case the other one so nobody would touch it. It's those simple little things that people don't watch and notice, because you need to watch the people and you need to see their processes. If you don't see that, then you're not going to be effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's certainly helped us, I think, become a lot more effective as we've been doing our work, which is sort of having that sort of empathy for what people are, really doing, and the impact that it can have personally on individuals there, in terms of that, they can lose out on a day's pay if they've got to go home because something's broken because of an IT problem, and for people in some locations, that has a big sort of personal impact, and we rarely sort of tend to take that into account when we're doing our sort of factory sort of risk and security work. I suppose one of the other areas as well we've always spoken about is the fact that physical security as well has been so sort of tied into everything, and we've encountered similarly situations where poor or non-existent physical security has resulted in quite some issues.
There's been several. Even funny ones. A funny one is going around the perimeter of a factory, again in Southeast Asia. I keep picking on them, but it's relevant. I was asking about the new IP cameras that were being put around the building. And they said they were having trouble getting them installed because they had a troop of monkeys that was coming by and chewing on the wires and ripping them out and eating them. And I thought, that's a problem, because I'd only dealt with in manufacturing of food, like flower mites, and things like that. So I never thought to deal with primates in a situation like that. But as a security professional, you kind of have to adapt to what's going on. I have a primate background, ironically, so I was asking them if they had caught the male, and they said, yeah, we did, and then they dispersed. He said, yeah, and he said, how'd you know that? And I told him my background. So you have that relatability, and the credibility that hits based on random parts of your life will fit in with what's going on inside manufacturing security as well.
Yeah. Now, we definitely weren't taking into account the potential primate impact on risk before
that's pretty funny, though. I mean, what if it was, just a bunch of just bad actor monkeys that were released, and, it could have been that. It could have been some sneaky thing. We were joking with that for a while, too. And another thing to consider as well, in terms of physical security, is also product security within physical security. I'm remembering an incident that happened in one of our food manufacturing sites in which I could personally consider it a terrorist attack. Someone went from peanut to non-peanut, back and forth, and back and forth. You can't imagine how difficult that was to completely recall that unit of food, brand loss, on top of the loss of that product, and then they had to clean it up, so that means some operators had to go home without pay. It's a lot of things to consider inside of a factory. That still shocks me to this day, that someone was so disgruntled as one employee that there wasn't any physical security controls to prevent something like that. Seems very simple, right? But nobody thinks that because they think people are inherently going to do the right thing.
And then there was the other situation where we almost accidentally found ourselves walking into a television sort of production line in an electronics factory without even realizing we were heading into it.
Yeah, there was no badges on the doors, right? I think they waved at us, held the door for us, and nobody stopped us. And we went all the way into the production line. And I think it wasn't for a couple people giving us a weird look that we didn't realize we were, because there was none of that at all. No badge access, no nothing. And that was weird and terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, it was an accident. We got lost.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. And then one more example would be, it was an accidental social engineering. We were in a facility that was a media factory, CDs, things like that. What would be the number one thing you wouldn't want to go out? Data. So whether it be a movie or a new song or something like that, you obviously wouldn't want USB drives, little hard drives, anything to go out. Well, I didn't realize that I had a USB stick in the bottom of my bag. I forgot it was there. I'm sure a lot of you forget where your USB sticks are all the time. And because of that, I didn't actually notice it until I got back to the office a week later that I had this USB stick that was on the bottom of my bag. Now, this particular facility prides itself on amazing physical security. Amazing. It's aggressive, like TSA, kind of on crack. So to be able to go through that security with a USB stick was incredible. So we called it out on a risk assessment, of course, because, whoops, we social engineered that situation. But they never dug on the bottom of my bag. I watched them check my bag. It was just a quick look in. I think they run a metal detector through, and that was the end of that. But they do a full body scan. So it's those little things where maybe things need to be revisited in factories, refreshers needs to happen. We really constantly were wondering, if it was because of the third party or it was because, the training was lacking. But again, it came down to the fact that there was really no empathy for the employees. They needed refreshers. It goes beyond security awareness. It's simple job requirements, right?
I think that's probably one of the most important points at all, because we seem to have this focus on, we have these sort of pillars of security that we think, is the right way to implement things in any sort of given location.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's not unique to manufacturing and factories, but probably other industries as well. But we include, things like employee security awareness training, as one of those. And I don't think people really know what that sort of either means or really entails, because when you've got, sort of operators who are working 12-hour shifts, 5 days a week, and firstly, when are you going to train them?
During their lunch hour, remember?
Well,
it was a lunch and learn, but that's the only time they had.
Yeah.
So they had to take a compliance-based training when they were supposed to be taking a break.
Yeah, so it becomes very unpopular, and it isn't really something that people see as being part of their responsibility. I mean, most of them don't have access to
terminals,
terminals anyway.
We did see it work in some places, though, that it was inbred into the culture of security in the factory culture. So it's almost like you shamed the person next to you, of course in a friendly manner, that they needed to be more security minded and vice versa. And they took pride in having a secure facility. I can't tell you how many times we walked into factories where they have the red, yellow, green for when the last injury was, and they were prideful that they hadn't had an injury in X amount of days. Same with security incidents. They viewed that as well, whether it be phishing or malware or viruses or whatever else. That was prideful, and those are the factories that succeeded, and those are the ones that weren't having any issues. I can remember a whole set of factories who didn't get caught in that whole WannaCry crisis because they actually were on top of it. Their security culture was tight, so they were all monitoring each other. And I think that's what we need to drive as security professionals, specifically in manufacturing security, is constantly over and over again, blend it with the culture, blend it with the culture. And I realize I'm asking us as professionals to kind of change our mindset and start to realize to look at things a little bit differently. But ultimately it works. It's about people and process. And what do they care about? Safety and production.
Yeah, so if you can sort of nail those things, and if you can include those in the processes, but I hate that term using the process, but if it can become part of what's embedded when you're actually going in and thinking about how infrastructure sort of security works and fits together with what people are actually really doing and what they think is important, then I mean we've had a lot of success in managing and reducing risk by doing that.
As long as you look at it as a holistic process. We always say a factory is just stuff comes in one way, gets mixed up, and comes out a different way. But everything in between is about people. If they're not paying attention, something could get totally screwed up in a line, whether it's food moving back and forth, the peanut story again, or potentially causing malware to be on an electronic device. It's about people keeping an eye on it.
Yeah, I think just about every incident that we've probably all dealt with has been either phishing or something around physical security. So re-emphasising the importance of making sure that those messages and the right approach to it sort of gets across in the right way.
Yeah, and since the factory is a family, they take pride in what they do. Legitimately, they take pride. It doesn't matter what they do in the factory. And if you can tie staying secure to that pride, it's such a win. It's a win-win overall. And I think that that's what's most important. You don't want to have incidents where people are maliciously doing things. I always say it's the Willy Wonka syndrome, where if someone offered you a couple $1 million to go steal that everlasting gobstopper, and you were an operator making less than $4 an hour, I think that you would think about it, at least if not do. And that's what we're trying to prevent, is give them a sense of pride that being secure is part of the culture of your job and in protecting your family inside of the actual factory.
So rather than taking this technology sort of bent and perspective on looking at these issues, I mean, our key sort of message out of this is around sort of empathy and working together not only with the sort of IT and the security organisations, but also learning what the operators are doing and every other part of the organisation, so that you can sort of develop that empathy and be a lot more effective in managing risk.
We developed the security controls for one of the major manufacturing companies we work for, first ever of its kind. And we had to go to battle and fight for it, not with the factory. They actually were in agreement with it. We beta tested it with them. It was with everyone else in the security industry. And it was very frustrating to make them realize that, hey, we're on your team, you're on ours, and this is how we see factories, and this is what needs to happen. This is what's successful and what's not. So I applaud all of you who are in manufacturing security in the audience, because it's a real big uphill battle at times. We constantly are having to switch mindsets and make people realize that it's not about security tools per se or new processes. It's about working with the people to be able to be more secure. Because ultimately, as you always say.
Yeah. Well, that was the section that we had the biggest amount of pushback in.
Yeah.
Was around the sort of awareness questions that we wanted to ask.
Yeah. And it's not just about security awareness, because like you said, you can just check the box and people will just sit through whatever. It's actually just imposing into their actual core of the culture of itself. And once that happens, it's actually pretty amazing. We have factories that were competing against each factory to be who's more secure, who has all their patching done, but in an appropriate manner that's going to work for their factory, and then who's done all this extra training, and who has security professionals in-house that know what's going on. It was amazing how that culture flipped on, and they ran with it. And I would like to see that more in all of our industries, whether it's automotive, oil and gas, moving forward. I would love to see it all.
So while it isn't saying anything new that it's people and process and security awareness, I think the thing that we are saying is that it isn't just those things. It's this having a complete appreciation of the challenges that everybody faces in those locations, and making sure that everybody knows why it is that they're being asked to do the things that they're doing, why they're being given these tasks to do, and the impact that they're going to have on production potentially if everything breaks production.
Yeah, even flushing a toilet would probably break production in a facility.
You've seen that happen.
I have. I have. I have a good friend who used to say that a gnome could sneeze on a toadstool halfway across the world and it would break production in a facility. And he's right, because it always does. And that's what's always scary, because you don't want to be breaking production, because as soon as you break production as a security professional, you're out. They don't want you anymore. You're going to take a long time to get back in. And that's lessons learned, of course, across the board. But ultimately, factories are family, and it's great when you're invited in, because you are family to them as well. Some of my best memories in my career were just getting to know a factory by observing it. Not only the people and the process they were doing, but how the factory functioned as this holistic organism and how it consistently moved. And it filled me up as a security professional, knowing that I get to protect something like that. That's so fulfilling. It really is.
And as somebody who came into it from outside of that environment, sort of being able to sort of learn from you, when I was trying to, sort of find my feet and understand what was going on and all those moving parts on the production line, having that knowledge that you already had was probably the thing that sort of helped me along the way, and has sort of kept kept the process going.
What did I always say to you? Stop paying attention to the shiny, look for the dirt. Yeah, and it was there. It always was.
Yeah, apart from tripping up over the occasional cable.
Yes,
yeah,
unfortunately. Yeah, well, I think we're all set. We're a little early, so that's good.
Thank
you very much, everyone.
I hope it's been interesting. Thank you.